talk about redistribution and what happens within the confines of someone's home is a different story altogether. But what about in the workplace? Because a lot of companies are grappling with this. I mean, paternity leave, maternity leave, flexi hours, stay at home, work from home. You know, how do you, and no one has the right answers at this point in time. Everyone's trying to sort of fix things as they go along. What would you think are the sustainable ways of trying to address the redistribution problem in the workplace?
I think having a really good family leave policy, when you look at what's happened in the Nordic countries in Europe, it's because they put family leave in early in their workforce. Not just for women, but for men. And not just for when you have a young child, but when you have an elderly parent that needs to be cared for. If both the man and the woman know they can take time off and still come back to the same level of job, it's vitally important. And if a man takes it, he engages with the children earlier, and it's more sustained over time.
How important is this? Because I think a lot of people don't understand and we talked about it, it's that cycle of expectation. Maternity leave means that you're the one who's going to be taking care of the child, and in that sense, the father's let off that responsibility, and you know, the message is that you take care of everything that's outside of the home. How do you break this burden of expectation, and how much does it have to do with corporate policy being able to break that down?
I think corporate policy, corporations are the first place that it needs to happen in the private sector, and I think if you do it in the government sector, it starts to work. And there have to be brave men who are willing to take it and say, it's okay for me to take this time off. Mark Zuckerberg just role modeled this in the United States, but that's why the family leave piece is so important, because even in a household where you do have gender equity in terms of this unpaid work, when the first child comes, you actually fall backwards. And again, that has to do with expectations, and so that's why it's so important to get these policies right.
But do you believe that reservation is a good way to go about whether it's reservation in Parliament? I mean, that's something that we're now debating once again. It's been on for a long, long time here in India, but do you believe reservation really is the right route to better representation?
I think it's really up to the country to decide what they want to do. Different countries have gotten at this in different ways, some by reservations, some by quotas, some by a quota that comes in for a certain amount of time and then goes away. So I'm not sure it's the right answer everywhere, but I think it's up to each country to examine that and to take it up and have a debate and a discussion about how are we going to get there? Where are we truly on gender equity, and what is the best route to get to where we want to go?
I also want to talk to you about something else that, you know, that has been in our consciousness since 2008, and that is the crisis of capitalism, or capitalism as we know it today. The lines of corporate governance and personal governance, if I could call it that, have also been blurred. And, you know, CEOs are now being looked at not just in the boardroom, but outside of the boardroom. What are you doing with your money? How are you spending your money? I mean, are you really leading by example? Do you see this changing the way that corporate leaders lead their lives?
I don't know whether it's going to change, but I hope that it will. I mean, I think one of the things that we should all say is if you make it to that point in society, you are lucky, right? You're incredibly lucky. And so how do you want to role model? How do you want to give back? Because there are places that capitalism doesn't work properly. It's why we have people who have fallen behind and aren't being brought along. And so for us, Bill and I try to role model that through our foundation, living our values. You see Azim Premji doing it. He believes in the value of education. You see Nandan and Rohini Nilkalani doing that, living out their values.
But you're really the exceptions in that sense. I mean, you're a small but growing minority of corporate leaders who are trying to give back to society. I mean, we've got the Global Compact, we've talked about the Millennium Goals, we've now talked about the Sustainable Goals, but how do you change the mindset of people who occupy positions of power?
I think they influence one another. I mean, look at Ratan Tata, the Tata family here. They're influential to us. When Bill and I were looking at what do we want to do with our foundation, what might you do, what's the role of philanthropy versus NGOs versus governments, we looked to the Tatas to see how they'd done it, how they'd thought about it over time. So
what did you like about what the Tatas were doing?
I think the fact that they said we need to go and invest in key infrastructure, we need to think about how you scale up, not just do pilot projects, but scale up. I think they thought well about their expertise and their role vis-a-vis the government. So we look to other philanthropists who've done this over time, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and I think that's true now. We've got a group of about 130 members of this Giving Pledge, philanthropists. We meet once a year, and it's really a learning opportunity to learn about the issues around the world, whether it's environment or health or women and economic opportunity and where are we lagging behind, what can philanthropists do. So I think over time that group will influence one another.
How important is it also to have a coalition of regulators? Because especially when we talk about the pharma sector, I mean, this is a problem that we're faced with here in India specifically. The generic drug industry is faced with this issue.
Yeah,
do you believe that is something that should be encouraged, especially at the level of a government dialogue?
I think you need to have a good set of regulations. It's what holds capitalism to its truest and best self. I think one of the best things you can say in Indian regulations is if you look at the banking sector most recently. They really took a forward-leaning, forward-thinking approach about how can we use payment banks to make sure that the banking sector reaches everybody, not just middle income and above, but everybody. And so now they're opening up these payment banks. We know now that men and women in villages will be able to save $1 a day, $2 a day. So if they face a health shock or they need the school fees, they've got it saved on their phone. To me, that's the best kind of regulator you can have. They're keeping the checks and balances on the system, but they're being forward-thinking about how do we move forward the economy for everyone, not just a sector of it.
You know, you've been engaging with India for a long, long time, Melinda. What are you most excited about? You know, we've got Christine Lagarde here today talking about how India is at a point of transformation, the Prime Minister echoing that as well, and there is a general enthusiasm about where India is poised today. But what gets you most excited about the India story?
When I see the growth that's happened in India, and I see India saying, how do we do better? How do we constantly innovate? How do we constantly look at our health sector? And I see the potential that's here in this country is not the potential I see in other countries. And the way democracies are messy, but the way the democracy works, the way you've got a free press, those are incredible assets. And so they're assets not just for this country, but for the region. Others look to India. How are they doing on the banking regulations? What are they doing on the mobile phones? Oh my gosh, what are we doing on the digital ID system? They are a model for the region. And to me, that's what makes me excited, not just about India's potential inside of itself, which is huge, but actually for the region.
You know, you were talking about the digital identity program, and Aadhaar has just been cleared by Parliament yesterday, or the Aadhaar bill, giving the card statutory backing now. What would that mean, especially for the Gates Foundation? I mean, Nanda Nilekani yesterday speaking to us said that this opens up a whole bunch of opportunities for the private sector to be able to layer on top of Aadhaar and roll out services. What would it mean, for instance, for the Gates Foundation here?
It's phenomenal, because then it means that you can reach this entire population. And for the government, of course, it means those payments that are going can be done very efficiently. You'll cut down the corruption in the system. You'll get more transparency. But in addition, now companies or NGOs or philanthropies can come in and put applications on top of that. So whether it's going to be on the digital financial piece of it, whether it's going to be crop insurance or credit for people or applications that are more useful even for women, that can all be layered on top of that system. So it is a backbone that I wish we could see in every country. It's really phenomenal.
You know, we were talking about democracy, and India is a messy one, but let me get you to comment on what's happening with the US at this point in time. Who would have imagined Donald Trump would actually have a real shot at being in the White House? Are you surprised with the outcome?
I'll just say that democracy is messy, and our foundation has to work with whoever's in office. So we worked incredibly well with the Bush administration. We worked really well with the Obama administration. So we'll wait to see. I certainly know better than to predict what's going to happen in any election and anywhere in the world.
Are you surprised with how it's turned out?
I think everybody's pretty surprised with how things are going in the U.S. But remember, there's still a lot of time between now and November for things to sort themselves out. So we'll see where it goes.
So you believe things will sort themselves out by November?
I think they will.
The other issue, and you know, of course it's being debated in the US at this point in time, but it's also being talked about here in India and pretty much everywhere else in the world, is Apple versus the FBI. You know, do you believe that it is right for the government to force Apple to do what the government would like it to do?
Yeah, I'm going to stay away from commenting on that. When you have my husband in an interview, I'll let you tell him his point of view.
I thought I'll get the erstwhile techie in you.
No. I do have that side of me, but I know better than to comment on Microsoft and Apple.
Okay, all right. So let me end by asking you, Melinda, you know, at this point, there are several priorities that the government is working on, and specifically on the healthcare and the education side. But the social indicators in India, we're talking about 7.6% GDP growth, but the social indicators in India have not kept pace. I mean, we're abysmal when it comes to a lot of the social parameters. If I would ask you about the 2 or 3 things that you would like the government specifically to put its money and its attention on at this point in time, what would those be?
I would say still absolutely health, because it's the best investment. Every dollar put into health is at minimum a $9 return. We know that from a great set of economic work that's been done globally. So I would say continue to invest in health, and then I would say invest in these gender issues, because if we could get women in India at the same rate as men in labor force participation, you'd add $47 billion to your GDP. That's huge. So we have to look at all the things that hold women back. What is it about their health? What is it about education? What is it about this unpaid work that keeps them out of the workforce? So you have to look at all of those levers of change and make sure that you open them up, collect data about them if you're going to move things forward. But to me, that'll continue to lift the economy up in a huge way.
Well, we hope that all of that does translate into reality. But Melinda, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us on CNBC-TV18. Appreciate your time as always.
Thanks for having me.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up the CNBC-TV18 special. From all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.